Namaskar, welcome to Global Scan. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. This is your one-stop destination for a roundup of all the major global developments of the week. In the show today, we track the revival of India-US Trade Policy Forum, China test fires another hypersonic missile, presidential elections in Chile and Venezuela, new Swedish Prime Minister resigns on first day in job, what is behind the currency crash in Turkey, and the sharp spike in COVID cases in parts of Europe. All that and more in Global Scan. Let's get started with the top stories. At SCO Council of Heads of Government meeting, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar highlights India's commitment to implementation of the mandate of SCO, says must pay heed to climate change impact on our joint activities. Indian Navy inducts INS Vela to strengthen country's maritime strategic power. This is the fourth submarine of Scorpion design, Kalabari class, Vela indigenously designed under Make in India. Sweden's first female Prime Minister resigns less than 12 hours into the job. Her coalition Green Party collapses when Centre Party refused to back the new government's budget. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu addresses 13th EAM Summit via video conferencing, calls for reform of UN Security Council and other organizations, stresses the need to mitigate the causes of persistent insecurity at global level. At least 8 killed in Somalia's capital as Islamist militants launch suicide attack on a UN security convoy using a vehicle laden with explosives. Islamist group Al-Shabaab claims responsibility for the huge blast. Let's begin with news from Asia. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar addressed the 20th meeting of Shanghai Cooperation Organization Council of Heads of Government held in Kazakhstan's capital, Nur-Sultan, in a virtual format. Minister Jaishankar said the world acknowledges that India is among the few large economies that have delivered in letter and spirit on Paris Agreement. Prime Minister Modi's recent call on One Sun, One World, One Grid and Green Grid initiatives is expected to spur development of a cohesive and robust global grid. India is ready to share its experience in climate change mitigation and adaptation in the SCO format. Minister said that this is the time to bring in the much-needed reforms to our global institutions, including World Health Organization, and rework our development strategies to face a post-COVID-19 world. For this, we need a reformed and reinvigorated multilateralism that reflects today's realities, that gives voice to all stakeholders, addresses contemporary challenges, and puts human beings at the center of our thought and policies. He said India believes that greater connectivity is an economic force multiplier, which has acquired greater salience over post-COVID-19 era. But any serious connectivity initiative must be consultative, transparent, and participatory. It must conform to the basic principle of international law, respect for sovereignty, and territorial integrity. India considered SCO as an important regional group to promote cooperation in various fields based on universally recognized international norms, good governance, rule of law, openness, transparency, and equality. He said it is unfortunate to note that there have been repeated attempts to deliberately bring bilateral issues into SCO. This violates the well-established principles, norms of SCO Charter, such as acts are counterproductive to the spirit of consensus and cooperation that defines this organization and should be condemned. Moving on, the United States and India on Tuesday revived their trade policy forum after a gap of 4 years. It last met in 2017. They agreed to continue work together on resolving the outstanding trade issues, including World Trade Organization disputes between the two countries. US and India also exchanged views on potential targeted tariff reductions. Tuesday's talks sought to integrate their economies across sectors and move towards securing an ambitious future for trade relations between the two strategic partners and fellow democracies.
India and the United States held the 12th ministerial level meeting of their Trade Policy Forum in New Delhi on Tuesday. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal, and U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai co-chaired it. The meeting followed the talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. on 24th September. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden had spoken about the need to develop an ambitious, shared vision for the future of the trade relationship.
We have been uniquely tasked, Madam, by our leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, to strengthen our economic ties and trade based on the rules of transparency and fair trade. The world coming out of COVID-19 has taught us many lessons. Just like the US has embarked on a Build Back Better program, India is working on an Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-confident, a self-reliant India, wishing to expand our engagement with the rest of the world, opening our doors even wider for international engagement, greater trade, greater economic ties.
The US agreed to consider restoration of India's beneficiary status under the US Generalized System of Preferences program. The GSP, under which exporters of particular products from India got duty-free market access into the US, was withdrawn when Donald Trump was in power.
Our trade policy forum was languishing for 4 years. I'm delighted that we have been able to rejuvenate it. It's only the beginning of a new chapter in our trade relations. But I do hope together we can revitalize it to engage and resolve outstanding issues in an amicable manner and send a strong message to the entire world that the US and India are stronger partners than ever before.
A joint statement issued towards the end of the talk said India and the US agreed to reactivate the working groups on agriculture, non-agriculture goods, services, investment and intellectual property, continue working to expand bilateral trade in agriculture and food products, adopt an agreement to finalize work on market access facilitation for mangoes and pomegranate arils from India, and cherries and alfalfa hay for animal feed from the US, and work to complete India's request for table grapes access to the US, while India agreed to work to finalize a mutually agreed export certificate to allow import of US pork and pork products.
The trade relationship between our two countries is a top priority, both for President Biden and for me. That's why it was important for me to come to India and relaunch the Trade Policy Forum on my first trip to Asia. There is a huge potential for growth between our two economies in areas like the digital economy, services, health-related trade, and yes, even agriculture. I believe that a revived TPF can help our trade relationship keep pace with other important aspects of the US-India partnership.
The US and India also decided to talk about visa issues and movement of skilled workers. The US also agreed to continue discussions on a social security totalization agreement. Bureau Report, DD India.
On to some other stories. China's round-the-world hypersonic nuclear weapon fired a second missile while traveling 5 times faster than the speed of sound. This is according to media reports. Though China tried to downplay the development, it stunned the world when it emerged that the weapon is far more advanced than originally thought. The hypersonic glide vehicle, a maneuverable spacecraft which can carry a nuclear warhead, fired a separate missile during its flight in the atmosphere over the south of China Sea. No country had previously been able to demonstrate this advanced engineering feat, and the test is said to have caught the Pentagon scientist off guard.
China has fired a missile from a hypersonic weapon as it approached a target during a test in July, according to a report published in the Financial Times. The report adds that Pentagon was taken by surprise because no nation was known to have this capability. A hypersonic glide vehicle launched by China fired a projectile over South China Sea while moving at 5 times the speed of sound. While officially not much information is available on this, some military experts believe that an air-to-air missile was fired. Others think it was a countermeasure that could hurt the ability of missile defense systems to knock out the hypersonic weapon, which can carry a nuclear warhead in a battle. China's foreign ministry spokesman said on Monday that China had tested a routine spacecraft to see if it was reusable, in an apparent effort to dismiss the idea that the spacecraft launched anything. The spokesperson said after separating from the spacecraft before its return, the supporting devices will burn up when they are falling in the atmosphere. If China's tests of hypersonic weapons are confirmed, it would suggest that President Xi may be exploring orbital strikes in a way to counter American advancements in shooting down ballistic missiles before they can threaten the US homeland. Last year, the US Navy had successfully intercepted a mock intercontinental ballistic missile. The development has caused considerable concern in the strategic community, especially in the region. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh on Sunday said that some irresponsible nations violate international norms and ethics, especially of UN Clause 1982 for narrow partisan interests. India, as a responsible maritime stakeholder, believes in freedom of navigation, free trade and an open Indo-Pacific.
1982 के यूनाइटेड नेशंस कन्वेंशन ऑन द लॉ ऑफ द सी, जिसे अनक्लॉज कहकर पुकारते हैं, इसमें नेशंस के टेरिटोरियल वाटर्स, एक्सक्लूसिव इकोनॉमिक जोन्स और गुड ऑर्डर एट सी के प्रिंसिपल को प्रतिपादित किया गया है। पर इन प्रिंसिपल्स की मनमानी व्याख्या एक रूल बेस्ड मैरीटाइम ऑर्डर की राह में बाधा उत्पन्न करती है। यानी कुछ नेशंस ऐसे हैं, नेशंस क्या हैं, मैं उन्हें इररेस्पॉन्सिबल नेशन कहना चाहूंगा, जो अपने नैरो पार्टीजन इंटरेस्ट के लिए हेगेमोनिक टेंडेंसी से इन इंटरनेशनल लॉज की आए दिन नई नई अनुचित व्याख्याएं करते रहते हैं।
US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who was in Bahrain on Sunday, reassured his allies in the Middle East that President Joe Biden's administration was committed to the region despite Washington's increasing attention towards countering China. During a meeting with US military personnel in Manama in Bahrain, Austin acknowledged concern in the region and globally that the United States was focused on China's challenge. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping told leaders of the 10-country Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, at a summit on Monday that Beijing would not bully its smaller regional neighbors amid rising tensions over the South China Sea. Xi said that China would never seek hegemony or take advantage of its size to coerce smaller nations. But the aggression of China towards countries like Taiwan and the Philippines and its growing assertion and dominance, especially in the South China Sea, has raised hackles of the international community. Bureau Report, DD India.
Let's talk about Turkey. Turkey's lira nosedives more than 15% on Tuesday after President Tayyip Erdogan defended the recent rate cuts and vowed to win his economic war of independence despite widespread criticism and plea to reverse the course. The lira tumbled as far as 13.44 to the dollar, plumbing records lows for 11th straight session before trimming some of those losses. Experts say the currency crash is indicator of a bigger economic crisis for Turkey, but President Tayyip Erdogan disagrees. Let's try and simplify what is happening to the Turkish currency and the economy. We'll try and look at the various facets about the Turkey currency crisis. Let's understand what has happened. Lira has crashed to record low of 13.44 to dollar this week before recovering a little. Moving on, the manner in which this crash becomes worrisome. Lira has shed 42% versus dollar this year, 42%, and becoming one of the weakest global currencies in the world. So in that ways, it sort of spells real worry for Turkey and its economy. So what caused it? First, excessive current account deficit. What does current account deficit mean? It just means that the amount of money that you're spending to import goods is much higher than what you're earning through exports. Moving on to the second important reason that seems to have caused the Turkey currency crisis, a large private foreign currency denominated debt. Turkey allows civilians to have their savings in both their local currency, that is lira, and also in dollars. The lira becoming weak, more and more people are saving their money in dollars, so much so that of the net saving in Turkey, 55% of the saving in banks are in dollars, not in their own native currency. Moving on to the third and perhaps the most significant cause of this crisis, President Erdogan's unorthodox ideas about interest rate policy. As I mentioned, he spoke about an economic fight for independence, economic war of independence. He believes that cutting the interest rates is the way to create jobs, is the way to boost the economy, is the way to boost the exports in the country as well. But conventional economic wisdom says something else. It says that when you cut interest rates, it also lowers, devalues your currency, and thereby when you're importing, things become expensive, affecting the economy. So let's try and understand the impact of this fall in the value of lira that it has had on Turkey. The annual inflation, quite naturally, the inflation increases when the currency is devalued. It's almost was at 20% in October. That was last month. It's one of the highest levels of fall that lira has ever witnessed. Moving on to the next point, over reliance on imported goods leading to higher prices. Turkey imports a significant amount of goods, especially energy related, from abroad, and when your own currency devalues, you have to pay more to be able to import the same amount of goods. So that is again further cascading into higher prices, also stifling growth as consumer confidence is hit. It all leads to the economy taking a hit when people's own confidence in their own currency declines. Moving on, we're talking about the Turkey currency crisis. The impact, the depleted foreign exchange reserves is also weakening the central bank. So the ways in which it can intervene and help the economy are also becoming limited by the day. So broadly, that is how the Turkey currency crisis is panning out and is a cause of worry for President Tayyip Erdogan's administration. And let's now take a look at news coming in from Americas. Two Latin American nations, Chile and Venezuela, witness electoral contest around the same time, while Chile has just concluded the first round of the presidential election runoff, where hard-right former Congressman Jose Antonio Cast finished on top. Venezuela has seen the ruling Socialist Party of President Nicolás Maduro emerge victorious in a low turnout elections. Here's more.
Chile was once known for political stability and economic growth in South America, but it was in 2019 that the image changed when violent anti-government protests began to spread through the country in late 2019. This time, Chile is headed for a polarized presidential election runoff next month. Hard-right former Congressman Jose Antonio Cast finished on top in the first round vote on 21st of November, ahead of leftist lawmaker and former protest leader Gabriel Boric. With nearly 97% of the vote counted, Cast had won 27.94% of ballots versus 25.75% for Boric, with a sizable gap between them and the rest of the field, although both were well short of the majority needed to win outright. More moderate, centre-right candidates performed well, a potential boost for Cast, who appears to be in pole position heading into the 19th of December runoff. There are split voters, one seeking a shake-up of Chile's free market model, and second are those demanding a harder line against crime and immigration. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, National Electoral Council awarded victory to the ruling Socialist Party in 20 governorships and the capital district of Caracas, and 3 to opposition politicians in an initial announcement on Monday following local and regional elections.
The Miranda state, with a participation of 39.53%, Hector Vicente Rodriguez Castro from the United Socialist Party of Venezuela leads the list with a total of 396,192 votes for a 48.19%.
Shortly after the first results were published, leftist President Nicolás Maduro celebrated the government's triumph.
Out of the country's 24 federal entities, the Great Patriotic Pool, the revolutionary forces have won 21 states, including Caracas, the capital of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We won 21 out of 24 states. A good triumph, a good victory, a good harvest.
only 41.8% of registered voters turned out to cast their ballot on Sunday, equivalent to some 8.1 million people, said the South American country's top electoral authority's president, Pedro Calzavilla. The results are a setback for the opposition leaders who returned to the fray after boycotting presidential polls in the year 2018 and congressional elections in 2020, arguing that a fair vote was impossible due to rigging and intimidation by violent gangs loyal to Maduro. DD India.
And NASA's double asteroid redirection test, also known as DART mission, was launched on Wednesday from California. DART, which is the world's first full-scale mission to test technology for defending Earth against potential asteroid or comet hazards, was launched on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 4 east at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. DART embarked on a 10-month-long journey into the space covering 11 million kilometers from Earth to demonstrate the world's first planetary defense system. According to NASA, DART's one-way trip is to Didymos asteroid system that comprises a pair of asteroids. DART will target an asteroid named Dimorphos, which is approximately 160 meters in diameter. NASA's latest mission is designed to deflect the asteroid from a potential doomsday collision with Earth.
Of course, I still love you.
And now, updates from Europe. In a tragic incident, at least 31 migrants bound for Britain died on Wednesday when their boat sank in the English Channel in what France's Interior Minister called the biggest migration tragedy on the dangerous crossing to date. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he was shocked and appalled by the casualties.
These young boys and girls were among a group of migrants setting off on a sea journey on 24th of November from a northern French beach towards Britain. More than 40 migrants, including 6 children, cast off from the beach near Wimereux, near Calais, all battling the bitter cold in black woolly hats and puffy jackets. Families trailed after with their children. One man walked holding a young boy by the hand. 2 others carried smaller children on their shoulders while the women carried belongings. They actually didn't know that this was their last journey. Among them, 31 people died on 24th of November after their dinghy capsized while crossing the channel from France to Britain. This is believed to be the worst disaster on record involving migrants in the waters.
As far as we know, 33 people capsized off Dunkirk and Calais. As of now, 31 people died or were not resuscitated, and there are 2 survivors who are currently being treated and whose lives are also unfortunately in danger. Among these 31 dead, we know that there were 5 women and 1 little girl. For now, we don't have more information on the identities of these people.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that he was shocked and appalled by the deaths.
I think that the details are still coming in, but more than 20 people have lost their lives, as you know. And my thoughts and sympathies are, first of all, with the victims and their families, and it's an appalling thing that they have suffered. But I also want to say that this disaster underscores how dangerous it is to cross the channel in this way.
Though both Paris and London blamed smugglers, a number of French politicians, including Calais Mayor Natasha Bouchard, blamed Britain for the problem, saying it should change its immigration policies. Before Wednesday's disaster, 14 people had drowned this year trying to make it to Britain, a local maritime prefecture official said. In 2020, a total of 7 people died and 2 disappeared, while in 2019, 4 had died. DD India.
Sweden's first ever female Prime Minister has resigned just hours after she was appointed. Magdalena Andersson was announced as the leader on Wednesday, but resigned after her coalition party quit the government and her budget failed to pass. Andersson had took over as Prime Minister from Stefan Löfven as head of a minority 2-party coalition supported by the left and centre parties. Sweden made history twice on the same day. The country elected first ever female Prime Minister, but Magdalena Andersson announced her resignation on November 24th, less than 12 hours in the top job. The Green Party quit her coalition, plunging the country into political uncertainty.
This morning, I was elected Prime Minister of Parliament to form a coalition government with representatives for the Social Democrats and the Green Party. The Green Party has now announced that they no longer want to be a part of the government. Here, each party has to make its own choices, and according to constitutional praxis, a coalition government ought to resign if one party leaves the government. My assessment is that the same, of course, needs to happen even when the Parliament has chosen a new Prime Minister and when the new government has not yet assumed power.
The Green Party quit after Parliament rejected the coalition's budget bill. The Green Party said it would support her in any new confirmation vote in the Parliament, while the Centre Party promised to abstain, which in practice amounts to the same as backing her candidacy. The Left Party has also said it would back her.
I've met the Speaker and have asked to be relieved of my duties as Prime Minister, but I have also told him that I am ready to be Prime Minister but in the single party, Social Democrat government.
While these parties were unable to agree a budget, they are united in the goal of keeping the Sweden Democrats, a populist anti-immigration party, from having a role in the government. Andersson took over as Prime Minister from Stefan Löfven as head of a minority two-party coalition supported by the left and centre parties. Global Scan Desk, DD India. Some news from Germany. A coalition deal has been announced in Germany after almost 2 months of talks following country's federal elections in September. Olaf Scholz, the centre-left Social Democrat Party's candidate, will be Germany's next chancellor, replacing Angela Merkel, who has led Germany for 16 years. The agreement between the SPD, the Greens and the Free Democratic Party will see them govern together in a three-way coalition for the first time. The alliance has been described as a traffic light coalition in reference to the party's traditional colours.
Presiding over what could be her final cabinet meeting, acting German Chancellor Angela Merkel bade her colleagues farewell. She was seen receiving a bouquet from acting German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz prior to the weekly cabinet meeting at the Chancellery in Berlin. Meanwhile, Social Democrat Scholz moved closer to becoming German Chancellor on Wednesday after agreeing on a coalition deal that aims to modernize Europe's largest economy, accelerate its green transition and bring the curtain down on the Angela Merkel era. The centre-left Social Democrats or SPDR presented their three-way agreement with the ecologist Greens and the Libertarian Free Democrats or FOP. The deal installs Germany's first three-way federal coalition government since the 1950s and ends 16 years of Merkel-led conservative government, marking a new era for relations with Europe and the rest of the world. The alliance, named a traffic light coalition after the three parties' respective colours, has a majority in the lower house of the parliament and hopes the government will be sworn in early next month after the parties ratify the coalition pact. It faces immediate challenges, with Germany tackling its worst COVID-19 surge yet and Europe grappling with the fallout from Brexit and a crisis on the European Union's border with Belarus. As Finance Minister and Vice Chancellor in the outgoing Grand Coalition of the SPD and Conservatives, Scholz, 63, was seen as a competent rather than a charismatic politician who, like Merkel, has moderate views and is adept at dialogue. Angela Merkel did not seek re-election after 4 terms as Chancellor. Her personal popularity ratings remain high, but her party is in disarray and facing a leadership contest after achieving its worst results in a federal vote following a gaffe-prone campaign by its candidate for Chancellor. DD India.
And let's now shift focus to Africa. The Sudanese military has blinked and has restored Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok to his post less than a month after staging 25th of October coup. Pro-democracy protesters forced the military to strike a deal with Hamdok where he'll lead an interim government with some technocrats. But Hamdok's own supporters are not accepting the deal, accusing him of betrayal.
Sudan has been witnessing a turbulent period. A coup took place in the country where the Prime Minister and his cabinet were arrested and the government dissolved. And then comes a new twist. Nearly a month after the unrest, Sudan's military reinstated Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok on November 21st and announced the release of all political detainees. An agreement was signed with the military leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and according to this deal, Hamdok will lead a new civilian government of technocrats for a transitional period. But the civilian coalition that nominated Hamdok as Prime Minister 2 years ago refused to acknowledge any new deal. Hamdok said that he had agreed to the deal to stop bloodshed. Hundreds of protesters marched towards the presidential palace in Khartoum on Sunday, defying tear gas to reject the deal between Sudan's military leadership and the Prime Minister. A 16-year-old died after being shot in the head by security forces in the Sudanese city of Omdurman. Security forces fired tear gas to disperse protesters as they approached the presidential palace ahead of the announcement of the deal.
We don't have anyone really to represent us. That is why I am asking the resistance committees to speak up on our behalf, because we don't have any politicians otherwise. So they must do the work of politicians. They deliver our demands, they tell the leadership what the people want and give them a time frame. If something is not achieved, we will be back on the streets. The civil disobedience can continue and nothing will keep us away from the streets. Not even death will stop us. During this protest, you can hear us saying that the revolution is for the people, power is for the people, and military should go back to their barracks. This means we want the exclusion of the military from the political process. We want a purely civilian government. The revolution is like a wave that takes out everything that comes in its way. I am a great supporter of Abdullah Hamdok, but there is a limit. The people have spoken. The people have rejected the mediation deal. The people want a complete civilian state. It is Hamdok's duty to listen to the streets. We are against any sort of mediation or any government that Burhan forms. Burhan must remove himself completely from the political scene. Him, Hamiditi and Ibrahim Gabar, the entire council, including the civilians in the Sovereign Council.
Hamdok was placed under house arrest when the military seized power on October 25th, derailing a transition towards democracy agreed after the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in 2019 that ended his 3 decades of autocratic rule. The military dissolved Hamdok's cabinet and detained a number of civilians who held top positions under the power-sharing deal agreed with the military after Bashir was ousted. DD India.
A huge explosion rocked Somalia's capital Mogadishu early on Thursday, triggering plume of smoke that rose from the blast site amid gunfire. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but Islamist group Al-Shabaab frequently carries out bombings in Horn of Africa country. The blast that occurred near the K4 junction in heart of Mogadishu was so huge it collapsed the walls of nearby schools and also left many cars mangled. Security officials could not be immediately reached for comment on what triggered the explosion and the casualties. Al-Shabaab has been fighting Somalia's central government for years to establish its own rules based on its strict interpretation of Islam's Sharia law. A fresh spike in COVID-19 infections are being reported from across the world. Let's now scan through pandemic-related updates from across the world.
Australia will allow foreign visa holders to enter the country from the start of December, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Monday, as it takes further steps to restart international travel and support the economy. Australia shut its international border in May 2020 and allowed only restricted numbers of citizens and permanent residents to enter in a bid to curtail the spread of COVID-19.
From the 1st of December 2021, fully vaccinated eligible visa holders will be able to come to Australia without needing to apply for a travel exemption. Eligible visa holders, including skilled and student cohorts, as well as humanitarian temporary working holiday maker and provisional family visa holidays.
The US Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the State Department has advised against travel to Germany and Denmark because of rising number of COVID-19 cases in those countries. The CDC elevated its travel recommendation to level 4, that is very high for the 2 European countries. The CDC currently lists about 75 destinations worldwide at level 4, with many European countries on the list including Austria, Britain, Belgium, Greece, Norway, Switzerland, Romania, Ireland and Czech Republic. Earlier this month, the World Health Organization said that European countries must work harder to prevent the coronavirus from spreading further as deaths and new cases surge. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that measures being taken to stop the spread of the coronavirus in Europe's biggest economy were insufficient and that stronger action is needed to be taken. She called on Germany's 16 federal states to decide tough measures by Wednesday. However, Germany has already decided to limit large parts of public life in areas where hospitals are becoming full of COVID-19 patients to those who have either been vaccinated or have recovered from the illness. Active cases have been soaring among the elderly whose first 2 shots of COVID-19 vaccines were at the start of the year and among children that are not eligible for inoculation. French Prime Minister Jean Castex has tested positive for COVID-19 and is isolating himself. Castex met with Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and other officials during the day. Castex's daughter had tested positive too for the virus. However, the French Prime Minister will continue to work and will remain in isolation for the next 10 days. Castex's positive test coincides with several European countries tightening restrictions to slow down infections and the number of people being hospitalized with COVID-19. Israel began rolling out Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccinations for 5 to 11 years old. Vaccination drives were also carried out in mobile vaccination units. The experts recommended that there should be a 3-week wait between the first and second shots given to children aged 5 to 11 years. However, no decision has been made for the children in age group of 5 to 11 years on administration of the third booster in order to maintain their green pass. Currently, all Israelis over the age of 16 years must get all 3 shots in order to maintain a valid green pass. In Kenya, the government has issued new health regulations to prevent a surge of COVID-19 cases. Kenyans will have to prove that they are fully vaccinated to gain access to government services in hospitals, education, tax and immigration offices, as well as many public places from 21st of December. However, business owners have criticized the government directive and termed it as unrealistic. The United States pharmaceutical giant Pfizer has said that company's COVID-19 vaccine provided strong long-term protection against the virus in a late-stage study conducted among adolescents aged 12 to 15 years. A 2-dose series of the vaccine was 100% effective against COVID-19, measured 7 days over 4 months after the second dose. South Korea reported a new daily record of 41,116 new coronavirus cases as the country battles to contain a spike in serious cases requiring hospitalization. At least 69% of hospital ICU beds were filled up nationwide and 83% in capital Seoul and neighboring areas alone on Tuesday. South Korea was one of the first countries to record novel coronavirus cases after it emerged in China in late 2019. New Zealand will keep its border closed to most international travels for a further 5 months. The government, however, outlined a cautious easing of border curbs that have been in place since COVID-19 hit in March 2020. Fully vaccinated international travelers will be allowed to enter the country from 30th of April next year onwards, with the reopening staged over time. Fully vaccinated New Zealanders and residence visa holders in neighbouring Australia can travel to New Zealand from 16th of January, while vaccinated New Zealanders and residence visa holders, most from other countries, will be allowed in from 13th of February.
Travelers will no longer be required to stay at state quarantine facilities, but other measures will be put in place, including a negative pre-departure test, proof of being fully vaccinated, and a COVID-19 test on arrival. Schools in the Netherlands are closing again rapidly after soaring infection rates among children leave many classrooms empty. COVID-19 cases among children under 9 reached a peak since the start of the Netherlands pandemic of 120 per 1 lakh inhabitants last week before beginning to fall. According to the country's biggest teaching union, the AOP, 2/3 of primary schools in the country have classes working from home more than once a week. Some virologists have advocated for extending the Christmas holidays or closing schools altogether to act as a brake on infections. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has said that COVID-19 vaccine boosters should be considered for all adults, with priority for those above 40 years, in a major change to the agency's guidance. Recommendations issued by the ECDC are not binding on EU governments but are used to make health policy decisions.
With keeping in mind the priority to close the immunity gap, countries should also consider a booster dose for all adults 18 years and older, with a priority for people above 40 years old. This is to increase protection against infection due to waning immunity, which could potentially reduce the transmission in the population and prevent additional hospitalizations and deaths. The booster dose is recommended at the earliest 6 months after completing a primary schedule.
The ECDC head noted that the boosters should be administered at least 6 months after completing the primary vaccine schedule. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Let's cover some more news and updates from around the world in fast-forward mode.
El Salvador plans to build the world's first Bitcoin city, funded initially by Bitcoin-backed bonds, President Nayib Bukele said, doubling down on his bet to harness the cryptocurrency to fuel investment in the Central American country. Speaking at an event which was closing a week-long promotion of Bitcoin in El Salvador, Bukele said that the city planned in the eastern region of La Union would get geothermal power from a volcano and not levy any taxes except for value-added tax. A gunman opened fire in Jerusalem's Old City, killing 1 person and injuring at least 3 others. The gunman, who officials identified as a member of the Palestinian militant group Hamas, was shot dead by Israeli security forces. 1 civilian shot dead by the gunman died of his wounds in hospital. Another was seriously hurt, and 2 Israeli police officers were wounded. The incident, the second attack in Jerusalem in 4 days, occurred near one of the gates to the flashpoint Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the 3rd holiest site in Islam. Jews revere the site as the remnant of 2 ancient temples. Firefighters sifted through debris after a powerful blast tore through a house in the suburban town of Marqués de Sobremonte in the central Argentine province of Cordoba on Wednesday. The home was completely destroyed while the explosion tore down walls from adjacent residences and sent shrapnel flying towards the street and a car parked in the street. The body of the 76-year-old homeowner was found at the site of the blast along with a firearm. No other deaths or injuries were reported. According to the province's prosecutor's office, investigators found 2 acetylene tanks commonly used for welding at the scene, which could have caused the detonation. 31 people died on Wednesday after their dinghy capsized while crossing the channel from France to Britain, in the worst disaster on record involving migrants in the waters separating the countries. The channel is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes and currents are strong. Overloaded dinghies often barely stay afloat and are at the mercy of waves as they try to reach British shores. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin briefed that 34 people were found capsized at sea, 31 of whom had died and 2 were rescued. 1 was still missing. The casualties included 5 women and 1 girl. While French police have prevented more crossings than in previous years, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson also reacted to the incident. He said that he was shocked and appalled by the deaths of the migrants.
I just want to say that I'm shocked and appalled and deeply saddened by the loss of life at sea in the Channel. I think that the details are still coming in, but more than 20 people have lost their lives, as you know. And my thoughts and sympathies are, first of all, with the victims and their families, and it's an appalling thing that they have suffered. But I also want to say that this disaster underscores how dangerous it is to cross the Channel in this way.
Salvadoran authorities seized 2.7 tons of cocaine valued at over $60 million, making it the country's biggest drug bust since June 2019. Defense Minister René Merino said that 9 people, including 3 Mexicans, 2 Colombians and 4 Ecuadorians were arrested while traveling on board 3 vessels 460 nautical miles off the Salvadoran coast. According to officials, the suspects were transporting 135 packages, each containing approximately 20 packages of drugs. The drugs were later confirmed to be cocaine. Central America and Mexico are the main transit points for South American cocaine destined for US markets. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that he is confident that the Colombian government is determined to fully implement the peace deal achieved with FARC rebels in 2016 during a ceremony in Bogota. He further said that he trusted President Ivan Duque's intentions towards enacting chapters of the agreement that include rural reform, solutions to the drug trafficking problem, and the overall implementation of the peace deal. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, signed a peace deal with the government in 2016, resulting in the demobilization of some 13,000 members, including 7,000 combatants. The agreement ended FARC's role in the Andean country's long-running internal conflict, which has left millions displaced and more than 260,000 dead. Cuba's neighboring countries have deported more than 1,200 migrants thus far in 2021, returning them to Havana in bilateral operations coordinated with the United States, Mexico, the Cayman Islands, and the Bahamas. The Caribbean island nation has suffered this year from both the effects of the coronavirus pandemic and the tough US sanctions, reducing its hard currency earnings over the past 2 years by around 40% and shrinking the economy 13%. Illegal migration from Cuba, particularly through Mexico, has increased in 2021 over the previous years. 61 Cuban migrants headed to the United States but were intercepted at sea off the Bahamas and were returned to Havana by plane on Tuesday. Cuba says that it advocates for legal, orderly and safe migration. It has blamed United States for the uptick in illegal migration, saying that the country's policies encourage Cubans to risk their lives to leave the island. DD India.
And now, all the glitz and glamour from the world of showbiz. Let's talk about the 52nd International Film Festival of India, IFFI. Here's a flavor of the cinematic celebrations from Goa, including the only Sanskrit film featuring in Indian Panorama section, which is attracting much attention. My colleague Rukma Datta brings us more.
As curtains come down on the 52nd edition of International Film Festival of India that draws closer, film buffs here do not want to miss any opportunity to watch movies. Bhagwan Dachukam, the only Sanskrit film in Indian Panorama in IFFI, is attracting immense attention, a satire and a comedy. We spoke with the director of the film, Yadu Vijayakrishnan.
I'm very honored to be part of this because right now my film is screening here. It's a different experience. I'm really excited about this. It's actually based on a 7th century play, but there are, I think, around 20 or 25 Sanskrit films made so far in India. I think maybe 30. But if you can see that there's a pattern. They are all follows a serious tone, and they are all desaturated color tone also. And I thought to make it colorful and make it comedy. So that's why I chose this subject. It's basically a satirical play written during that era.
This time, along with the International Film Festival of India, the BRICS Film Festival is also being organized and attracting a lot of spectators seen thronging the venue to watch films from various BRICS countries. Rahul Raveel, chairperson of the BRICS Films Jury, had only the best things to say about the films that have come in.
Initiative बहुत ही अच्छा है. It's opening up a new dimension. मतलब ये जो 5 countries है BRICS की, उनमें फिर diverse cultures ये सब देखने को मिल रहा है. And ये हो रहा है कि सिनेमा से एक चीज़ सीमेंट हो रही है, जो relationship जो 5 countries का है, जो मेरा ख्याल है BRICS का mainstay है.
The screening of Tamil film Kudangal, directed by P. Vinod Raj and making its way to the Oscars, also took place on the 25th. Rukma Datta's report from Goa, DD India.
And some stories now from a more intimate world around us, stories beyond headlines. US First Lady Dr. Jill Biden received the White House's Christmas tree. This year, the tree is an 18.5-foot Fraser affair from North Carolina. The tree that arrived in a horse-drawn wagon will eventually be placed in the Blue Room, in keeping with the tradition that started during Dwight D. Eisenhower's administration. The Christmas Island crab migration continues as millions of red crabs continued emerging from the center of the island for their annual migration journey to the ocean on the island of the coast of Western Australia. According to the Christmas Island National Park Natural Resource Manager, this year's migration has just been absolutely epic. The roads have been seething mass of red crabs. It caused traffic jams on the small island and people having to get out of their cars and rake them out of the way. After mating, the male crabs journey back to the jungle first, as the females stay behind in the burrows for about 2 weeks to lay eggs. Each female crab can produce up to 100,000 eggs, which will deposit into the ocean. The Christmas Island red crab is endemic to the island and protected by law. Copenhagen's Tivoli amusement park lit its Christmas tree as well as 1 million lights to mark the beginning of the Christmas season. After almost 2 years of being deprived of normal life, this year's theme is togetherness, closeness and love, and it's being illustrated all around Tivoli with hearts. Normally about 1 million people visit Tivoli during Christmas season, but last year it had to close just after a couple of weeks because of COVID pandemic. Altogether, up to 1 million lights decorate the amusement park in the center of Copenhagen. Dazzling tree lighting show kicks off Christmas season in Athens. Athens' annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony took place in the capital's main square on Tuesday with a spectacular light and music show. The 60,000 bulbs on 19-meter-high fir tree from Kapanisi in central Greece were lit amid smoke and rays of light from lamps placed on rooftops around Syntagma Square. The ceremony comes earlier than usual this year. The tree lighting usually takes place in December. Amidst music and gratitude, Mexican mariachis honored the patron saint of music, Saint Cecilia, for helping to get them through the pandemic. Musicians and their families attended the Mass for Saint Cecilia with gatherings in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe and in Garibaldi Square. Mariachi performer Fausto Villagrán thanked Saint Cecilia for having recovered from COVID after being hospitalized a year ago. During the service, mariachis serenaded the small statues of the saint dressed in traditional mariachi attire. Polar bears frolicked in heavy snow in central Canada. Bears can be found throughout Canada. Churchill, Manitoba is recognized as one of the 3 largest polar bear maternity denning areas in the world, according to Canadian Geographic magazine. There are reportedly 25,000 to 30,000 polar bears in the world. 60% of these live in Canada. Arctic white polar bears were labeled as threatened species in 2008 by the United States under the Endangered Species Act. South Korea has recently introduced a new health staple in the market, white kimchi juice, made from fermented cabbage and vegetables and sold in juice packets. The new product was launched at convenience stores across South Korea from Thursday. Park Hyun-kyung, who had to take frequent overseas business trips for her equestrian company, came up with the idea of making pocketable kimchi a staple Korean cuisine when she was abroad and missed the comfort food from home. Instead of the popular style kimchi with red chili pepper and salted fish, Pak chose white kimchi to reduce spiciness and smell, which is one of the oldest type of kimchi, only made of vegetables and salt. Global Scan Desk, DD India. Let's now find out the importance of this week in history.
On 22nd of November 1963, US President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. On 22nd of November in the year 2005, Angela Merkel was elected Germany's first women chancellor by parliament after her Christian Democrats won a national election. On 22nd of November in the year 2013, students in Thailand formed world's largest human Christmas tree. On 23rd of November in the year 1976, French writer, adventurer, orator and revolutionary André Malraux, who became General Charles de Gaulle's long-serving culture minister, died. On 23rd of November in the year 1996, on this day, a hijacked Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 767 with 163 passengers and 12 crew on board crashed into the sea off the Comoro Island after apparently running out of fuel. Close to 125 people died in the incident. On 23rd of November in the year 2005, on this day, former Liberian Finance Minister Ellen Johnson Sirleaf became the first woman to be elected head of state of an African country. On 24th of November in the year 1859, British naturalist Charles Darwin published his seminal work on the origin of species, detailing the theory of evolution of a mechanism by which species gradually adjust to their environment. On 24th of November in the year 1969, the Apollo 12 command module splashes down safely in the Pacific Ocean, ending the second manned mission to land on the moon. On 25th of November in the year 1936, Anti-Comintern Pact was signed between Nazi Germany and the Empire of Japan. The agreement concluded first between Germany and Japan and then between Italy, Germany and Japan, ostensibly directed against the Communist International but by implication specifically against the Soviet Union. On 25th of November in the year 1952, Agatha Christie's play The Mousetrap opened in London. Still playing to audiences today, it holds the record for the longest continuous run of any show across the world. On 26th of November in the year 2000, Republican George Bush was certified the winner of Florida's decisive 25 electoral college votes. The next day, he declared himself victor of the disputed presidential election. On 26th of November in the year 2001, Nepal's King Gyanendra imposed a state of emergency after at least 100 people were killed in 3 days of violence carried out by Maoist guerrillas fighting to topple the monarchy. Global Scan Desk, TD India.
As we conclude this edition of Global Scan, we're leaving you with the images that stayed in news this week. Till we meet again, Namaskar.